Hello everyone, it's Davey Mooney coming to you from the University of North Texas where I run the jazz guitar program. Benedetto artist, Sunnyside Records artist, got my Sunnyside Records up here, and my Mel Bay Improv book, Personalizing Jazz Vocabulary, and the new book, Into the Labyrinth, An Anatomy of Position Playing for Jazz Guitar, is going to be out sometime this year, probably late spring, early summer. And today I wanted to talk to you about the tune Stella by Starlight, a real uber standard. And I have a long history with this tune, as I do with many of the songs that I talk about in this video series. And I do this song a lot in my improv class, and it's interesting because my improv class here at UNT, I usually pick 7 sort of real hard jazz standards. You're some Coltrane changes, some Wayne Shorter tunes, Monk tunes, etc. And I have another set of 7 standards that I have that we mess around with, and we change the meter and we change the key, and those tend to be standards that I feel like the students should all know anyway. And within the 7 hard jazz tunes, I usually put in one standard that's a little bit trickier. Like sometimes I'll do some Cole Porter songs like Dream Dancing or Nobody Else But Me, Jerome Kern songs. And Stella by Starlight this semester is the first time that I've decided to put that in with the hard jazz standards, because it's a tune I spent so much time on over the years that it's kind of become second nature to me. But it's really a complex song too in many ways, and I feel like if you can play Stella by Starlight convincingly and make the changes, then you can pretty much play, that's good evidence that you can sort of play changes in the colloquial way that we say that, because there's every kind of, so many, not every kind, but so many kinds of functional progressions in this tune. You get minor 2/5s, major 2/5s, deceptive progressions, minor 2/5 cycles, regular 2/5s, and a lot of modulation. It's just a really brilliant tune. And so yeah, this song comes from a movie called The Uninvited from the early 1940s, 1944 or something. And I remember when I was a younger musician, I think in my 20s, I went and rented, back when they had rental video stores, I went and got, the VHS of The Uninvited, and I was excited. Like I thought it was going to be a classic Hollywood movie. And I guess it's classic in the sense that it's from that era. But spoiler alert, it's not Casablanca, y'all. It's okay, It's not I wouldn't consider it like an amazing, excuse me, classic Hollywood movie. But Stella by Starlight is in there. That's the theme. Although it's not called that. Stella, I guess, is the ghost. I can't remember the exact plot, but I think it comes in D major, if I'm correctly, in the key of D. I went back and I was trying to listen to clips, and I got the sense that maybe sometimes it seemed like it was an E flat. I think the whatever shows up on YouTube or whatever is not exactly always calibrated perfectly, maybe sped up, but if I remember correctly, it's in D. And then a few years later, Sinatra did it. I think 1947. That's the first vocal version with lyrics, and that's in G. And so you get a lot of jazz versions in G throughout the years, and I believe it was Miles does it in B flat, and I imagine he's the one that put it in B flat. There's a great 1958 version with Bill Evans and Train and Paul Chambers and co. And then the other version that's really rocks my world is the 1964 concert version on the ballad on My Funny Valentine, that album, where you have this amazing yell from the audience right during Miles's, I think during the head, I forget exactly where it happens, but there's this primal scream of joy, I assume, that comes from an audience member. But and full disclosure, I of course, my generation, I learned this tune from the real book, in the 90s sometime when I got it. And as some of you may know who follow this series, I'm a bit of an apologist for the real book. I know it's incorrect in many places, but it's also correct in many places, and I would defend the changes that it gives for this tune, for several reasons. One being that, if you go through Sinatra, The Uninvited, it's kind of you can hear it in the opening credits, but I kind of feel like Sinatra is close enough to the movie theme that I'd use his changes as the original changes, although it's a string arrangement, so sometimes it gets a little funny with trying to put chord symbols on a string arrangement. It works and doesn't work because there's moving lines and things like that. But those changes versus, what Miles does in 58, and, there's other versions before that. Jimmy Rainey does it, and, everybody did this tune. But there's a lot of variety and variation in the chords in certain spots, as is often the case with these tunes. And even between the 58 Miles studio recording and the 64 recording, there's a lot of variety. And I feel like in that 64 recording, I think if you went through every chorus, you'd get a variety of changes in what they do. So, the real book does pretty good. It actually stays fairly close to what the string arrangement does, although the real book has it in B flat, whereas the string arrangement is in G with Sinatra. And the changes, the real book, it gives the source as Miles Davis, but the changes in the real book aren't really the Miles Davis changes. So anyway, I guess I'll talk about the tune a little bit. The original, I'm going to analyze it in B flat, although, people play it in G. It's a hard tune to transpose too. I think I know it, I can get away with it in G and B flat, but if I had to transpose it to, I wonder what would happen if I tried to do it in D. I might get off a little bit because it goes all over the place. I mean, the original, the first chord would be like B diminished, although that gets turned into E minor 7 flat 5 A7 with the Miles version and many versions. I mean, most people are going to play that. And then the next chord would be, I think on the original would be like an F7, F dominant, although most people will play like C minor 11 to F7. And then a 2-5, F minor 9, B flat 7 to E flat to A flat 7, sharp 11 to B flat. And that's the first little bit. And it's interesting because the tune is in B flat major. I remember my Hank Mackey telling me this many years ago, just how interesting it is that the tune doesn't get to the one chord. It goes all around it. It doesn't get there until, I guess, the 9th bar, 8th bar, whatever that is. But, so you have minor 2-5 of the 3 chord, right? But then it doesn't go to the 3 chord. You think, okay, well, E minor 7, A7 usually would be a minor 2-5 of D minor, but then there's this deceptive movement of, okay, it goes to C minor to F7. Okay, what? And that's a 2-5 of B flat, but it doesn't go to B flat. Then it does a 2-5 of the 4 chord, which is E flat. And then it finally, subdominant minor, or a backdoor 5, 2-5, as I've heard people call it here. I kind of am partial to subdominant minor. 4 minor going to 1. But then even when it goes to 1, it's got the melody goes, has that suspension, like the 4th. And then and minor 2-5 again, that actually does go to D minor, so resolves the way it's supposed to. And then most versions, including, that original, you have another sort of 4 minor sound going to F. So that D minor is almost like a little pivot chord there, as the 3 in the key of B flat and the 6 in F. Although that's a place where there's some divergence with the Miles in 1958 and Sinatra. So Miles, the 58 version, they actually just do a G minor to the F, like a 2-5 to the F, rather than a 4 minor to the F, which is interesting. The Sinatra, if we were to do in B flat that string arrangement, you get a lot of the same stuff, but you would get like B flat diminished to F7. Then you would get the 2-5 to the 4 chord. This is all pretty much the same. Of course, he's in the key of G. A flat 7, and then you'd have the minor 2-5. And you get the 4 minor on that string arrangement, but instead of like B flat minor 6, you get kind of B flat minor with the 3rd in the bass. So with D flat in the bass. And then the F major chord, has the 5th in the bass. And then that B flat diminished again. And the minor 2-5, A minor 7 flat 5 to D7 going into the bridge that you have on each version. So Miles goes in that spot of the tune. You have the minor 2-5 to D minor. Miles, instead of going, this is on the 58 version, instead of going B flat minor to F, he goes G minor, sort of C7 to F. And then an E minor 7 flat 5. Miles does that on the, or Bill Evans plays that, although I think he puts it's like a minor 7 flat 5 with a natural 9 in it. And then they go E flat major 7 to D7. Sinatra, and again on the Sinatra, it's a string arrangement, so there's so many lines moving. I don't know if they play like a minor 7 flat 5 chord as such, but it kind of harmonically ends up in the same place. It might be a pedal, but the idea that it's like a E minor 7 flat 5 or A7 sus flat 9, and then A minor 7 flat 5 D7 going into the bridge, which is G7 sharp 5, and everybody agrees on that. Another version, the Miles 64, and I have to kind of go back and forth and sneak a peek so I don't get too confused by this stuff, but Miles 64 starts the same as Miles 58, and most versions where you have this. At first I think it's a rubato with Herbie and Miles, but and then when the band comes in, you know. Goes to the D minor, B minor 7 flat 5, B flat minor 6. It's almost like a little Cole Porter. So from D minor to 3 over C, B minor 7 flat 5, and then they go A7 flat 9, D minor, G minor, C7 over B flat, A minor 7 flat 5, D7. So man, you can't blame the real book for. So I didn't even say what the real book does there, and I think what a lot of people of my generation, how they learned this tune initially, before people told them they learned it wrong, was you do that minor 2/5 to D minor, you have a B flat minor 6, and then F major, E minor 7 flat 5, A7, A minor 7 flat 5, D7. Which is not that different than the string arrangement, you know, that you would have, because B flat diminished, E minor 7 flat 5, A7, it's kind of the same function, right? The diminished relationship, B flat diminished is A7 flat 9, with the flat 9 in the bass, and then A minor 7 flat 5, D7. Miles has more of he has two different ways, at least, that he does it. I know, like I said, I didn't go through every chorus in the changes that they play, like behind George Coleman's solo, etc. But on that first head in, it's pretty different. You can. And then the bridge, G7, sharp 5, C minor. And then again, that 4 minor sound going back to B flat. And I think Miles on 64 goes to like an E flat minor major 7, and then they actually go like an E diminished for a bar, and then a B flat major 7 again, like a 1 diminished to 1 sound. And I think I've talked about in other videos, you know, it's that 1 diminished, flat 3 diminished that you get in a lot of these tunes, where I always think of it as a 5 of 3, but it can go back to 1 because the 3 chord and the 1 chord are so similar. And they function, you know, they have a tonic function, but they really can be interchanged. And I think that flat 3 diminished that you hear so often is more often than not functioning that way. Although it does often go to the 2 chord, just like it does in this song, right? Usually sometimes you get in that context of like Bye Bye Blackbird or something, where you have or Let's Get Lost now. Diminished. If you play Let's Get Lost in B flat diminished, eventually it goes to C minor. So it's not unprecedented. And then the last part of the song, the last 8 bars. So you know, it's kind of an AABA song, except it's really A B C D, right? None of the sections repeat. So the last 8-bar section, even though they're all 8 bars and it's 32-bar tune, E minor 7 flat 5, A7, D minor 7 flat 5, G7, C minor 7 flat 5, F7, B flat. And sometimes you get some chromatic 2 5s there. What do they do on Miles? I gotta check. He goes on the head anyway. They go to an A flat 7 sus on that third bar of the last A, and then a D minor 7 flat 5 G7. And I think they go like, Herbie plays like some kind of C7 altered rather than C minor 7 flat 5 to F7, and then does a kind of B flat 4 1 thing at the end. So yeah, there's a lot going on in that song, and yeah, each one of those you really have to know how to. I remember I used to take that song, I used to play it when I was a freshman at UNT. I had kind of been introduced to it later in my high school career at a New Orleans Center for Creative Arts because it was hard and I couldn't really, I feel like I didn't have a really good handle on it to play the way I wanted to play. So I remember my first semester at UNT, I used to just sit out on this bench outside of my dorm, like with my trusty metronome, and just kind of practice figuring out ways to, like, for instance, to make E minor 7 flat 5 A7 resolve to C minor, and you just, But what I would do too is kind of resolve to, if I resolve to the note F, which would normally be the third of D minor, it kind of still works over C minor. It's the 11 of C minor. Really, the note A too kind of works. It's the 6 of, of C minor. Even though the bass note is C and not D, that works. And you can kind of just play like D harmonic minor and just resolve it to a note that sounds good over C. And I have a chapter in my book that's loosely based on these chord changes, where I talk about different things you can play in that progression, And that the other thing that I remember was really hard for me was at the time was the minor 2/5 cycles, like you have in this song and you have in Woody and You, the Dizzy Gillespie tune, and a bunch of other songs that I'm blanking on right now, but resolving a 5 chord to a minor 7 flat 5 was kind of like awkward for me for a while. And I remember I always convert that minor 7 flat 5 to either a B flat major 7, B flat major 7 sharp 11, or like a G minor 6 chord with the 6 in the bass. So, if I'm right here in the middle of the neck, I'm not really thinking. I'm thinking. Like G minor to A7. And then if I wanted to stay here for D minor 7 flat 5, I'm thinking kind of A flat major 7. And then if I want to stay for C minor 7 flat 5, I'm kind of thinking G flat major 7 or G flat major 7 sharp 5. To deal with that progression. And there's so much more happening in this song. It's really a masterpiece of definitely my favorite standard. But one other thing, I'm gonna play some courses on this tune, but since in my improv class, we do a lot of messing with these standard tunes. We change the meter. So this is a nice classic. You can do a classic sort of jazz 5 on this tune, or 7, or whatever you like. But be able to go like. So I'm going to play some choruses in 5/4 on it. And, when I talk to my students who don't necessarily have experience playing in odd meters like that, I say what I used to do to practice getting comfortable in 5 and 7, and I'm not an odd meter genius by any means, and these days in the music it's a lot of mixed meter. You're lucky if a tune stays in 1 meter for too long. But to get comfortable with 5, I used to practice. I would set up a track, like record a track, or get the metronome going, and I would practice on, if it's the standard sort of jazz 5 where you have 3+2 to maybe like 2 dotted quarters and a half note, I would practice just playing, go through the tune and playing on the 3 side of the beat. So if I was going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so forth, so I could feel, because I could play in 3 and I could play in 2. It's just it was hard to almost sort of feel the negative space of that the 2 going by after I did a 3, and vice versa. I might go. Just play on the 2 side of the beat, and eventually I would bleed into from the 2 to the 3 and mess around with it. But the goal was always, and still is, being able to play the same type of rhythmic language and the long lines that I like to play, and over the bar line stuff that I would play in 4/4 and 3/4, in 5 and 7, so it doesn't sound too like boxy. That's, I think, when people first start playing in those other meters, that's something that has a tendency to happen. And for me these days, with the mixed meters and 13s and 11s, I still have to shed those and make myself a practice tape, and eventually I can get it, start to feel the clave of it, the groove of it. But 5s and 7s I'm pretty good at, because I have tunes in those meters that I've played a million times. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to play some choruses in 5, in B flat, and I have some changes that are somewhere in between all those different versions that I think are reflective of what you might come across on a gig. Of course, these days, usually what you come across on a gig is somebody like reading off the iReel thing on their phone, which, times change, but I think everybody should memorize these tunes. But anyway, all right, here you go. Hope you enjoy it.